I want to go relatively quickly through the first act and just touch on a few things that I think are significant. What do I always say? Beginnings and endings. Yes, read the first line. What is the first line of Hamlet? Not committed to memory? For shame. For shame. First line. Who's there? Who's there? It seems innocuous. It seems harmless. It's, a couple of guys hanging out on a bare stage. You don't know what's going on, but you're told, who's there? And what's this play about? Hamlet. Yeah. Who is Hamlet? No, I mean, who is Hamlet? That's what this play is about. Who is there? That's what this play is about. Okay, I read those two words. That's what the play is about. I can pass any test they take on it now. I'm just going to quit reading right here. Who's there? Identity. Perception. Who is there? It's a question. It's an interrogative. It's wondering. Who's there? It's the plot. Nay, answer me, stand and what yourself? Unfold. Do people fold? What folds? Paper folds. Sarah? Yeah, well, it means disclose yourself. Don't make any sudden moves. These are guards on a rampart on the outside of a castle, essentially, and they're guards. Their job is to make sure that everything is safe and that nobody suspicious is coming up. And so when Francisco says, stand and unfold yourself, say, put your hands up. Don't make any sudden moves. Let's keep things nice and calm. So he's being a very guard-like person on a literal level. But on a figurative level, we're back to unfold. That is a curious word. People don't unfold. Paper folds. Paper is different than people. What do paper and people have in common? You can reveal yourself. Ooh. When you unfold, you reveal. Yes, you can reveal yourself on paper. Is that what Shakespeare is doing here? Possibly. Maybe. You unfold yourself. In the past, in several different works, I have suggested that whenever a character starts reading or talking about reading or interpreting in any way, that means pay attention. There's reading going on here. This is something to pay attention to. This is not just a couple throwaway lines at the very beginning where you just, yeah, all right, fine, tell me what the story's about and it'll kick into action soon enough and then I'll pay attention. No, pay attention right from the start. Who's there? Nay, answer me. Stand and unfold yourself. Bernardo returns with, long live the king! That's an odd thing to say. Why would he say that? Maybe it's a password. Yeah, a password is what? Okay. What is a password?
It's like night, so they can't see each other. So maybe it's always that they're friendly.
Yeah.
Password's like a barrier.
A password is like a barrier. What is it? It allows you into the place. Yeah. It's another way of saying, shut up and let me in. But it is saying it in a peculiar way. It's to show allegiance, but it's also just sort of a throwaway line. Long live the king! Well, it's not really a sincere sentiment. It doesn't mean what the words mean. It has no literal value. It's just, all right, this is the password. This is what we're going to say. You could easily say doodly farb, and it would still be saying, okay, the literal value of that is nil, but I can interpret it as having this extra value. It means something more. It means something different than the surface. The surface is meaningless. The true import is within. Wow, that sounds deep for the third line? Could this be intentional? I wonder. I think Shakespeare is just, he's just filling pages at this time. This couldn't be serious. He's not really spending that much time packing meaning into this. Bernardo, he. Identity. Identifying themselves by name. You come most carefully upon your hour. Bernardo. 'Tis now struck 12. Get thee to bed, Francisco. Francisco. For this relief, much thanks. 'Tis bitter cold, and I am sick at heart. 'Tis bitter cold. July-ish afternoon, perhaps? Are they really cold? No. So they're shivering and they're doing this. Good acting. Appearance is not reality. It's all fake. And I am sick at heart. Sick at heart? Who cares? Yes, the blues. Yeah, who cares? What's going on inside? Don't talk to me about what's inside. I only care about behavior. What's external? What's reality? What can I recognize? I don't want to have to worry about what's going on inside you. There's too much in there. I don't care. Doesn't matter. Does it? Who's there?
Yeah, the whole poem.
Yeah. Yeah. These notes are getting sounded right at the start. And all you got to do is stop and say, huh? And you are alerted to them. Enter Horatio and Marcellus. Friends to this ground and liegemen to the Dane. What do we call that again? Another version of a password. Another blank, empty expression that means something different than when it appears. It has a literal value that is very simple. It has a more complex and richer interpretive value. Give you good night, O farewell, honest soldier. Marcellus, who hath relieved you? Bernardo hath my place. Give you good night. Exit. Francisco's part is already over. Small parts, small actors. Francisco, I give you good night. O farewell, honest soldier, who has relieved you? Bernardo hath my place. Give you good night. All very, ordinary changing of the guard stuff. Not particularly interesting. Very common, very ordinary. Probably happens at this time every night. Shakespeare is putting this up there for a reason, maybe just to put you guys in, a nice sleepy time state of mind, saying, well, these things sort of happen. There's nothing that importantness here. I'm just going to sort of lull myself into, okay. Now I'm going to wait for them to start talking about the plot. Now, let me look at the program. What's this play? The play's called Hamlet. None of these people are named Hamlet, is it? Yeah, I'm just going to tone out a little bit, and I'll perk up when I hear the name Hamlet, because that's when I know the play's getting started. Bernardo, say, what? Is Horatio there? Horatio says, a piece of him. Not an entire part. A piece. Interesting. Why would he say that? Is he perhaps not fully invested in it? Is he just waking up? Not all of me. Most of me's back in bed. It's complicated. There's something going on here. There's more to him than just what we see on stage. Welcome, Horatio. Welcome, good Marcellus. Marcellus, what has this thing appeared again tonight? This thing. A thing has appeared. Suddenly, sounds like plot. Something has appeared. Something happened. Oh my God. And it's a curiously amorphous something. It's a thing. They don't name it right away. It's curious. It's ill-defined. Sfumato. Bernardo, I have seen nothing. How do you see nothing? Now, Shakespeare, who knew a thing or two about the English language, could very easily say, I haven't seen anything. But instead, I've seen nothing. That's a positive statement. I have seen nothing. Can you see nothing?
Nothing out of the ordinary.
What's that?
Nothing out of the ordinary.
Okay, but that's not what he wrote. Nothing out of the ordinary is what you're bringing to it. That's your interpretation of its literal value.
They haven't seen what they're looking for. Seen nothing.
I've seen nothing. You can view that. You can read that many different ways. Marcellus, Horatio says, "'Tis but our fantasy, and will not let belief take hold of him." Horatio is a scoffer. Horatio says, oh, it's just fantasy. You don't know what you're talking about. That's all just silly stuff. Horatio is a skeptic. Horatio is a rationalist. Horatio doesn't fall for these silly rumors about ghosts and goblins and spooky stuff in the night. Horatio is a steady, tempered soul who's going to judge stuff empirically. Horatio, well, yeah, kind of, likes reason. Horatio is a doubter. Horatio, I argue, in this one scene, the first scene in the play, Horatio is kind of functioning as the protagonist. And he's also functioning as everybody else. And we'll get to that. Horatio, tush, tush, twill not appear. Tush, tush, ha, 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 you silly little peasants. You fall for this. Oh, how silly. Bernardo, sit down a while and let us once again assail your ears that are so fortified against our story. What we have seen, what we have tonight seen. Sit down a while. When somebody says, sit down a while, let me tell you a story. He's a storyteller. He wants to make a once upon a time type thing out of this. He said, no. And a good actor can have fun with this. Says, no! Everybody sit down. Gather around, folks. Let me tell you a tale that'll set your hair on fire. He sets the mood. He eases into it. You can just feel him building the suspense. Last night of all, when yon some star that's westward from the pole had made his course to illume that part of heaven. Now I'm putting a little extra spin on it, but you can see how highfalutin his tone is suddenly here. For a guy standing the midnight watch on a rampart, he's suddenly quite the orator and the classical poet, if you will. Where now it burns Marcellus and myself, the bell then beating one. Dun, 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 dun. He's having fun with this. But what happens then?
Ghost appears.
Boom! The ghost appears. He is telling a story. He is trying to set the mood. He's trying to weave together all the storytelling stuff, the imagery, the tone, the little air of mystery. He's trying to set all that up, and then suddenly, the ghost shows up. The ghost, which is the subject of his story, interrupts. His story looks all the more silly because it was interrupted by reality. The ghost he was about to tell this story of is suddenly there on the stage, and breaks into his version of it. No. Now, again, he's telling a story. We know this, and so we should be aware that he is pulling out all these little dramatic stops to try and influence us like stories do. But then he's interrupted. Now, we know this is something that we should pay attention to because every time somebody reads something or talks about writing or talks about reading or references storytelling or narrative in any way whatsoever, we know that this is a writer who is suddenly thinking in terms of writing. And we should be aware of some of the conventions that he is dealing with. So he's telling this story and he sets it up like kind of a ham actor would have his moment. And then reality jumps in and takes the thunder away from the story and exposes the story for being just a kind of a silly convention and a geeky little plot. But it's not reality that interrupts. What is it?
A ghost.
A ghost. Is a ghost reality? It's still in this play. You had a story being told within the play that was suddenly interrupted by reality, but the reality is also part of the broader play. Folds and folds and folds of illusion all mixed together so that you don't know where the illusion stops and reality begins. And you are constantly having to doubt whether or not you can trust what you're seeing because the appearance is, well, no, that's reality and this is the story. No, wait, no, that's the story and this is reality. What? Because he's blurring all those lines. Sfumato, closing the distance between the fantasy and the reality and trying to make you think about the tension between them. The ghost shows up. Bernardo, who is kind of a stand-in for a poet, a little bit of a blowhard storyteller himself, starts goading on the interpretation of the ghost's appearance. Horatio asks, "What art thou that usurpest this time of night, together with that fair and warlike form in which majesty of buried Denmark did sometimes march? By heaven, I charge thee, speak!" Now, he's trying to make sense of this. He is reason, and he is demanding that, well, it's standing there, why can't it just tell me what it wants? Bernardo is the one, by the way, who singled out that it is like the king that's dead. Bernardo is the first one to recognize this. Bernardo is always pushing along the interpretive value of what they're seeing. The reality is not just what you see, it's more about what's hidden behind that. And Bernardo is always goading everybody to say, well, all right, this isn't just a ghost, it's a particular ghost. Look closely and you'll see it looks like the former king. And Horatio is just sitting there trying to make sense of it. Horatio is a little dumbfounded. And he keeps demanding that it respond to him, as if a ghost has nothing better to do than just do the bidding of poor little Horatio. I charge thee, speak! Marcella says, it is offended. See, it stalks away. Stay, speak, speak, Horatio says. I charge thee, speak. He's starting to sound a little impotent. He's lost his sense of reason. Yeah, he's been confronted by something so alien to everything he believes, so bizarre, and he can't get his head around it. So he's just sort of yelling at it, saying, why can't you do what I'm telling you to do? He's lost his sense of control. Bernardo, how now, Horatio? You tremble and look pale. Is not this something more than fantasy? What think you on it? Horatio, before my God I might not disbelieve without the sensible and true avouch of mine own eyes. And here I'm thinking of St. Thomas sticking his finger in Christ. I won't believe anything until I test it for myself. What's that?
I wish I could talk the way they talk.
Well, you know, Shakespeare puts really good words in your mouth. But they're not all speaking Shakespearean, English. A lot of this is fairly clipped language. A lot of this is fairly short lines, and it's going back and forth, which moves the momentum along. You're not getting long speeches at this point because so much is coming at you. It's meant to scare you a little bit. It's meant to sort of shake you out of, your own frame of mind. This is how the story gets you in the beginning.
It's not like soliloquy.
The soliloquies generally come a little later. Yeah. But right now, he's just trying to get you into the story, and he's doing that with short, quick lines of ordinary people not speaking so much in poetry as just, speaking in very vivid language. Horatio and Bernardo, they Horatio has one long speech in here, and the one point I'll make about this is that it shows how he is twisting himself in knots. All of the lines are fairly quick back and forth. Then Horatio has one long speech that goes, like 20, 25 lines? And in that, he is convulsing with logic and rhetoric and trying to figure things out. Let's see. All right. Our last king, whose image even but now appeared to us, was, as you know, by Fortinbras of Norway, thereto pricked on by a most emulate pride, dared to the combat, in which our valiant Hamlet, for so this side of our known world esteemed him, did lay this Fortinbras, who by a sealed compact, well ratified by law and heraldry, he's suddenly very concerned by the verifiable truth of what he's saying. Ratified by law. He wants to be very specific. He wants to be very grounded. He wants to be very rational. He sounds like he's writing a term paper, for God's sakes. Did forfeit with his life all those his lands which he stood seized of to the conqueror, against the which a moiety competent, which is a legal phrase. Who comes out with legalisms? A guy who's struggling to make sense of what's happening to him. He doesn't understand it, so he's shifting into this kind of linguistic backtalk of, what do I understand? What do I know? So rhetorically, he's just falling back on ways of speaking while his mind tries to catch up to him. As by the same covenant and carriage of the article designed, his fell to Hamlet. He's writing a will, essentially, there. He's talking about a will. Now, sir, young Fortinbras, of unimproved metal, hot and full, hath in the skirts of Norway here and there. And now he's talking about the current political situation. Because, again, he knows that. He doesn't understand the ghost. So he's trying to recover his reason. And that degenerates to... Bernardo says, I think it be no more, but even so, well may it sort that this portentous figure comes armed through our watch, so like the king that was and is the question of these wars. Horatio responds, a mote it is to trouble the mind's eye. In the most high and palmy state of Rome, a little ere the mightiest Julius fell, the grave stood tenantless, and the sheeted dead did squeak and gibber in the Roman streets. He's starting to cite old stories about what happened in ancient Rome, and starting to see that, okay, this is not just a legend, because again, he has learned this stuff. He's plumbing all of his learning. He's a very learned scholar. And he's trying to find a grounding for what he has just confronted. But now he's also reading into it and saying, well, okay, it's not just a ghost. It means something more. He sees in it as stars with the trains of fire and dews of blood, disasters in the sun and the moist star, upon whose influence Neptune's empire stands, was sick almost to doomsday with eclipse, and even the like precurse of fierce events, as harbingers preceding still the fates and prologue to the omen coming on. He's starting to see portents. He's starting to see prophecies. He's starting to see it's not just a ghost, it's a warning of something more. He's reading into the reality and wondering, what does this mean? Who's there? Re-enter ghost. But soft, behold, where it comes again. I'll cross it, though it blast me. Stay, illusion! If thou hast any sound or use of voice, speak to me. If there be any good thing to be done that may to thee do ease and grace to me, speak to me. If thou art privy to thy country's fate, which happily foreknowing may avoid, oh, speak! He keeps demanding that this unnatural, otherworldly apparition communicate with him. And it's refusing to. And he feels that distance of the mystery that he just can't reach. He cannot penetrate. And it's terrifying him. The ghost disappears. Bernardo. It was about to speak when the cock crew, and Horatio, and then it started like a guilty thing upon a fearful summons. I have heard the cock, that is the trumpet to the morn, doth with his lofty and shrill-sounding throat awake the god of day, and at his warning, whether in sea or fire, in earth or air, the extravagant and erring spirit hies to the confound, and of the truth herein this present object made probation. Now he's quoting like old wives' tales about what happens when a ghost disappears. He's gone from resisting what he was seeing, not believing it at all, and then trying to find some sort of a logical understanding of it, trying to find some sort of historical reference for it, and now he's into superstitions. He is slowly chipping away at everything he believes in just to try and explain what he sees. Marcellus says, it faded on the crowing of the cock. Some say that ever against that season comes, wherein our Savior's birth is celebrated, the bird of dawning singeth all night long. More old wives' tales. Marcellus is kind of an idiot. Horatio. So have I heard and do in part believe. In part believe. Remember, he was the person who showed up in part. He now believes in part. He also started off by saying, tush, tush. How silly you are. But look, the morn, in russet mantle clad, walks o'er the dew of the yon high eastward hill. Break we our watch up, and by my advice, let us impart what we have seen tonight unto young Hamlet. For upon my life, this spirit, dumb to us, will speak to him. Do you consent we shall acquaint him with it, as needful in our loves, fitting our duty? Marcellus. Let's do it, I pray. And I this morning know where we shall find him most conveniently. Exit. Horatio began saying, please, you silly people think you saw a ghost. That's adorable. And then he sees it for himself, and he's spooked. And he tries to figure it out, and he tries to understand, and he tries to demand. He tries to control the other world, the realm of mystery. He tries to command it to explain itself, to unfold itself to him, but it won't. And so he scrambles through his head for other explanations. He tries history, he goes to superstition, he is worn down. His reason is worn away very quickly. And at the end, he's not sure what he's seen, but it's valid enough that he's got to go tell the prince about it. He believes it enough that, all right, this is worth exploring. I know I saw not nothing, I saw something. Now, this is a great way to start a play. It sort of drives you into the action in a couple of different ways and gets you involved. It reveals the central dynamic. The problem is the entry of the ghost. The backstory is King Hamlet had this ongoing war with Fortinbras, and there have been some political tensions, and the consequences to that are still bearing out. It gets you a lot of that, but doesn't answer anything particularly definitively. What it does do, this whole scene, is put you in the place of Horatio. Because everybody walking in there, and there was a remarkable array of people that went to these plays, but they were all people of the Renaissance. The Renaissance was, as we have seen, a skeptical age. They believed in reason. They believed in, oh yeah, that's all kind of silly. A lot of those little beliefs. These are urbane Londoners of the early 17th century. They're not going to fall for this silly, silly stuff. Shakespeare needs to get them involved in the story. And he does it by presenting a character that everybody can more or less identify with. Somebody who is skeptical. And you say, yeah, it's a story about ghosts. Okay. You got to get over that. So he attaches it to Horatio. And through this scene, Horatio, as the protagonist, needs to get worn down, needs to be a safe representative for the audience who will be naturally skeptical. And as his skepticism is eroded, so is the audience's, because suddenly they're believing, well, okay, maybe there is something to this ghost. Maybe it's not just a fantasy. I did just see it on the stage. Oh, wait, no, that was an actor. It wasn't reality, or was it? I'm not quite sure, because certain things interrupt and certain things just go on. The line between reality and fantasy, between what is real and what is art, what is ideal and what is human, is permeable. In a world where a ghost can wander around the earthly realm, what does that tell you? How does that make you feel? What does that suggest to you about the other world?
Well, the play is pretty realistic other than that part. So kind of makes it realistic.
Yeah, aside from the ghost, and that's a big aside from the ghost, it's a very realistic play.
Yeah.
It doesn't dwell on oh my God, there's a ghost. Pretty soon people are just going to take it, oh yeah, there's a ghost. And the plot is going to maneuver past that.
Like it could have been 100% realistic had it only have been Hamlet who had seen it. Then you would have questioned like Hamlet's state of mind.
Yeah.
But they all saw it, so it's like
it doesn't give you that easy out of just saying, well, he's crazy. Yeah, he's thinking all sorts of gooey. What's that?
They were all
hallucinating, maybe. Those nights were awfully lonely up there and, kind of dull. I wouldn't be surprised if they had a little something that they passed around.
eating mushrooms.
Yeah. I mean, that would explain also Bernardo suddenly gets very talkative, and some people just won't shut up when they get a little bit of a buzz going. Yeah, that's a plausible thing, and I wouldn't be surprised if, some staging of this. And again, you see no stage directions on here besides characters enter and characters leave. You can have them doing all sorts of cool stuff. So I would not be surprised if in the history of production of Hamlet, and there have been quite a lot of them, you don't have, at some point, some actors like passing something back and forth. Whether it be a bottle or something smaller between two fingers, I don't know. They can very probably do that. But that's a director's choice. All right, well, you would stage it a little differently. Everybody's going to have their little things. And part of the fun of seeing Shakespeare performed as opposed to read, because reading it is, reading it is an acquired taste. See it performed, and you can see the actors having these little interactions and having those little moments. You can see Bernardo hamming it up, saying, everybody gather around, sit down, and let me tell you a story. You can see Horatio just like bristling at hanging out with these clods who think they saw a ghost. You can have actors bring certain spin to these lines. The lines are phenomenal in themselves, but a good actor can take them beyond that. And doing so, it feeds into the theme of the play itself, which is that there is more to life than just what you see. The objective reality on the page can unfold itself in many different ways, and it is up to you to take an active part in creating that and imagining what's going on. Because again, all of these guys, all of these actors were on this stage that is completely bare. And they're asking the audience to come along with them and listen to this story, and let's all just pretend. And it's not real. It is very false in many respects. When the ghost shows up, it's just one more thing that is not real to them. Shakespeare plays with this constantly to point out how unreliable our human senses are in distilling what is truth, what is valuable. We cannot see ideals. We just have to see what is in front of us. And sometimes what is in front of us is a lie. And that's why all the conventions that he's playing with work. Because they underscore that, yeah, everything you see is a lie. That girl who's now pretending to be a boy so she can tell the boy she loves how to go about and win the girl he loves, who is actually the rival of the first girl. Those aren't girls. They're men in dresses. It's all fake. My favorite comes in King Lear. Little diversion into King Lear, my personal favorite of all his plays. There's a scene where an old man who has been blinded is being led out onto a cliff. He wants to kill himself. He wants to end it all. And he's being led out there by a madman who is actually his son, pretending to be insane, and not his son. But they're going along, and you see these two actors walking along the stage, and he's saying, "Oh, it's very steep." Yes, it's very steep. "Oh, I can hear the wind." Oh, I can hear the wind. "Oh, it's so far down." It's so far down. And he convinces the older man that, okay, let's jump. And they jump. And then they get up and they realize the younger man never let him out onto a cliff. Just walked him into a field. There was no cliff. There was no wind. There was nothing far down below because they were always standing on perfectly level ground. There was never any danger because, of course, they're on a stage. But Shakespeare is making you realize that's just a stage and realize that your senses can be deceiving. Because when they are saying, oh, it's so far down there, you're swept up in it. You're going along with it. You're buying it. You're saying, oh, okay, well, I guess the convention of theater is that, yeah, you believe that. They say they're on a cliff. They must be on a cliff. I'm going to buy into that. But you can't, because your senses can't tell you everything. Thomas is trying to rely on his senses, and that is a prevailing impulse of the Renaissance. But Shakespeare is there to point out that no, it's not just that. You can't rely on your senses. Your senses can only take you so far. The world is too complicated to just go on your own abilities. There is more out there that we just don't understand. Sarah.
Is this play actually like done in front of people? There's no like use of like props or anything? Or like they don't like, you know how like in plays like they use props or like they like make the stage like seem like.
Sure. Well, asking about the production of this play implies many things, but first of all, are you talking in his day or ours?
I guess in his day he would.
In his day, they would have some props, but not very many. And
So would using props like kind of go against what like, he's trying to do?
the stage trickery that they would employ for this first scene would generally be a trap door that the ghost can appear from. Sometimes they could lower them. When we talked about the Greeks, we talked about Deus Ex Machina. They had a crane that they could lower or raise actors onto, like Medea at the end. But realistically, you know, they didn't have an awful lot of bells and whistles. There wasn't much to do with this. And one of the benefits that I see in going to, quite frankly, Shakespeare in the Park is it is another open-air theater. You get spectacular sets. They put a lot of money into that, quite frankly. But it is still all written for a fairly bare stage. That's all just a little extra window dressing. But still, you're in there and you're very much aware of the reality of it because you're outdoors. I particularly like how in summer, if you go to a show on a Sunday night during the summer in Shakespeare in the Park, you hear a lot of helicopters because they're all going to the heliport on the west side for everybody who just spent the weekend in the Hamptons and are now flying back because they don't like traffic. It's fun. But yeah, the reality of it is supposed to be fairly minimal from his perspective. You can do many different things with it. You can dress it up a million different ways. There have been a lot of productions of this. There have been a lot of movies of this, and they all take advantage of whatever they can. I would say, while you read, it's important to bear in mind the limitations that he's working with and how he's trying to make them advantages instead of just limitations. How he's trying to goad you to imagine things and then point out that, you know, you're just imagining things, right? James.
Like, if you were to reflect this into the paper, and you were to talk about how this influences society, like how would you approach that?
Influences society in what way?
Or authority? The topic question.
Okay, well, authority. I'm not going to write a term paper right now, but
No.
if I were doing that, I would suggest, well, I would begin by contemplating, well, authority.
This is more like about family issues.
Yeah, on a literal level. But the value of perception, the value of appearances, the value of interrogating something and trying to figure out what it's really about. When you look at the king, do you see the crown or do you see the man? When you look at any figure of authority, what is that authority based on? What makes that person inherently more powerful than me? What is so special about that person?
So it's to ask, to question.
Who's there? Do you start by questioning or do you start by accepting? Horatio begins this scene dismissing, then questioning, then demanding, and finally accepting. But you have to ask yourself, what is he accepting and what's he really doing? Because he says, well, we're going to go talk to Hamlet about this. Maybe Hamlet will be able to get to the bottom of it. You can read that a bunch of different ways. Hamlet is the prince. Hamlet is a kind of authority figure. The question of legitimacy is all over this play because Hamlet should be king when his father dies. Why isn't he? He's not a child. His father died. Firstborn son should be the king. Never quite explained.
No. And he's like not young. He's like 33 or something.
Well, the age is always a little bit of an open question, but yeah. He's fully capable and in fact should be king. But he does not necessarily act like a king.
No. He's like,
He tends to ask too many questions. He tends to get lost in questions and spin off into his own thoughts and just never quite come back to getting the job done.
like the to be or not to be questions.
Yes.
What's on the other side? Like
Yes, to be or not to be. That's a declaration of somebody who needs to get, smacked around a little bit.
he's like questioning. No one's come from the other side of that darkness.
Yeah, it is unknowable.
Yeah.
It is unreachable. It is so abstract and ideal. We have no intercourse with that whatsoever. Maybe we should just focus on the here and now. Maybe we should just leave that to there and say, well, okay, we cannot access that realm at all. It's a mystery. For now, while we're here, while we're alive, maybe we should just focus on the earthly stuff we have some contact with, some sense of reality for. As you read the rest of this play, I told you I just wanted to touch on it very lightly today. First scene, beginnings and endings, first scene, it lays out the central problems of appearance, reality, getting lost in your own thought, and this conflict, this natural and eternal conflict between what is ideal in the world and what is human. And as you read through the rest of this play over the course of the next 2 weeks, I want you to bear those considerations in mind and see if you can chart in your mind where Hamlet goes, because he jogs around on these questions. At certain points, he's very directed and very focused, and at other points he's just sort of off and considering the ideal. His problem is he cannot stick. Okay.